Agile gets a lot of hate, but getting past the jokes and cliches, people are still wary of the cheaper prices and almost exclusive online market. I've ended up buying 3 of these guys directly from rondomusic.com, trying to get my hands on those growly sounds in untapped frontier. So what have I learned messing with these guys? How do they compare to other commercial level extended range guitars like Ibanez, Schecter, or Jackson? Let's take a look. This is Kevin from Said Too Much. Other than weight being an issue for all commercial level extended range guitars, I have no complaints on shapes or finishes. All 3 have arch tops with arm and stomach cutouts. The 8 and 9 are a beautiful natural satin finish, while the 10 has a cool flame maple top with a nice gloss finish. The 8 string is slightly thicker, probably due to the Floyd Rose tremolo installed and or the bolt-on neck. All 3 of these guys have 2 truss rods I've easily been able to get to, and the fretwork is smooth all the way down the necks. All beautiful and functional in my opinion. There's no fancy binding or fret inlays like say Schecter, but honestly I could care less if it saves me a couple $100s. The 9 and 10 have fan frets, which I highly recommend. I used to think they were ugly, but it definitely makes things a lot more comfortable and allows for longer scale lengths / brighter tone, without making the higher strings too tight or require them to be impossibly thin. The 28 and 5/8 inch scale length on the 9 and the 30 inch scale length on the 10 aren't too uncomfortable, similar to a short scaled bass. Schecter isn't even in on the fan fret game yet, but Ibanez and Jackson offer a couple fan fret designs. There's nothing past an 8-string model, however, and there's not nearly the amount of models as Agile offers, although the models they have online aren't consistent throughout the year. One last factor to think about is how a neck-through versus bolt-on affects tone. Although the neck-through gives more sustain, the bolt-on is clearly brighter, becoming even more obvious on the low strings. Unfortunately, I haven't seen Agile offer a bolt-on with fan frets yet, with Jackson and Ibanez giving you no choice, so it's a difficult trade-off with several layers. All 3 of these guys have in-house Cephas pickups. Obviously they're a pretty standard humbucker design, with what I'm assuming are ceramic magnet poles because of the cheaper price and brighter tone. The 9 and 10 are soap bar design, which seems to make the most sense when creating a pickup to fit a variety of fan fret ratios. Putting the pickup at an angle also widens the string spacing in a sense, so you need to shove another pole in there when slanting the pickup at an angle. Competitors like Ibanez often use EMGs, and with no EMG 10010s or 11011s, that's probably why we don't see an Ibanez 10-string or even a fan fret 9 from them. At least not yet, as they have been getting creative with new pickups. The Agile 9-string has Cephas 10 passive pickups, and the 10-string has Cephas 11 active pickups. The active is louder but more compressed. This can be a bit of an issue when trying to utilize a full range and the different dynamics of each string, as I learned in my 10-string tapping song. But in other ways, the compression can help iron out and assist distorted tones. So it's just another multi-layered trade-off. It's hard to judge what sounds best for these instruments since we're all still experimenting. Certainly we need to keep an eye on the future for new ideas, but this applies to all commercial level extended range guitars. This is where a lot of problems lie, especially on my 8-string. There's a lot of setup if you want a truly floating tremolo bridge, and adding 2 more strings to try and balance out with more springs is tricky. I actually bought and installed a Hipshot trem setter, which is supposed to let you change the tuning on one string without throwing out the balance, but I ended up just blocking off the tremolo altogether. Then there's the saddles themselves that you can't change the action on. They are slightly different heights to begin with, but not enough to match the fretboard radius, and the saddles for the high B and E strings seem to be swapped for some reason. So despite some rearranging and shifting the center saddles by putting different stacks of aluminum tape under them, it's still a little bit awkward. Honestly, this has made me hate Floyd Rose altogether. Checking the website now though, I can't even find a single Floyd Rose model, so that probably speaks for itself. You might have more luck with a Kahler if you really want a tremolo, but I don't recommend it. Now for the 9 and 10 string. Rondo Music does not advertise these guitars as tuned down in fourths, but allude that they can be, and both came out of the case tuned that way. That being said, the intonation was horrible. The higher strings were okay, but the lower strings needed the saddles taken all the way back. The screws on these individual saddles eventually get in the way too, pinching the string. You need to trim the screws to keep going. And even after all that, tweaking the truss rod and action up until the point of fret buzz, it's still not nearly perfectly intonated. If you stick with the lower frets, you'll be okay, but if you want to use those higher frets, you basically have to retune on the 12th fret. Maybe strings being a little sharp and dissonant can be utilized in metal, but it's obviously a design flaw. As far as strings go, I found what comes stock to be, of course, too thin and loose on the low strings. I definitely recommend buying thicker strings. For my 9, I've got a .110 on the C sharp instead of the stock .90, and on my 10, I've got a .120 on the G sharp instead of the stock .110. I use a company called Labella Strings, but there are several online companies that make thick strings for guitars, including Kahler, which is where I got the super thick strings for the contrabass. I was worried about these super thick bass strings fitting through and resting in the ferrules, but the .120 gauge fit to my relief. I did have to slightly drill out the saddle though. Of course, with all the different scale lengths and bridges, you sometimes run into the issue of a string taper not starting soon enough to fit into a tuner. But I found that if you solder the string past the nut, you can unwind it a little bit to get it through. All this is a bit of a headache, but if you're comfortable with guitar setup, you should be fine. To be fair though, Ibanez, Jackson, and Schecter are probably a lot better in this area. So unless you're willing to shell out several thousands of dollars for a boutique custom or semi-custom instrument, I still recommend Agile. I've had a lot of fun and successful projects with these guys. Once you build your own preferences and maybe even your own innovations, it might be worth investing in something a little more expensive. Agile itself even offers a pretty reasonably priced custom build option too, which is pretty amazing. Ibanez, Jackson, and Schecter might be a bit of a step up, but not nearly as big a step towards where I think the extended range guitar world is headed. Again, all three are still lacking in the 9 and 10 string department. I could make a full list of all the things I hope come to the industry in the future, but for now I'm more than happy with these budget guitars. Now if only we can get people to stop hating on extended range. Why not just pitch shift? Why not just play a bass? Well, why not subscribe for some more experimenting? For now though, enough said.